fell again. I fell a third time. Can't get away from the sin. I keep falling. Then I come back to you, crawling, asking forgive me now, I'm balling, knowing that I let you down, appalling. I don't wanna jeopardize my calling. When I hear your voice no more, I'm halting. I just wanna live in the world you're revolving. I am so imperfect, I'm getting involved in these flesh-tied friends, the blind consulting, pulling me away from the world and revolting. Asking for forgiveness is probably insulting, but you keep taking me back and you're vaulting. Give me chances. You keep giving me chances. You give me chances. You just keep giving me chances. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is the Elevation Podcast. I want to ask you something. Imagine this. You love the Lord. You love the Lord so much. You feel the call of the Lord on your life. You love the people of God. You feel the call of God so much in your life that you become a pastor and you open up a church and you love pastoring the people of God, but after a while it weighs on you. It weighs on you. It weighs on you. It weighs on you. It frustrates you. It hurts you so to the point that you give it up. You say, I'm closing the church. I quit this. You give it up and become none other than a bartender, a pastor / bartender, which would really sound kind of strange, except for the year of 2020 actually makes this not so controversial. But this is something that is super, super interesting. And I have a guest whose process is just that. From pastor to bartender to book writer. This is going to be an interesting Elevation Podcast. My name is Shawn Riff-Raff. I'm ready to do this. Let's go. Stand up, brand up, fam up, hand out, no way, hands up, know what, name that, it's mine, claim that, it's time, message, we shine, above all, the decline, the darkness cannot last, the shadow of my past, before I gain knowledge of heritage, I have the bloodline that I share, most powerful out here, the mover of mountains is who I am touting, the richest among us is who I'm the son of, from sundown to sun up, that's how I the come up, position is just mine, the favor in due time. Can't have it, man, you lying. The powerless, you trying. Enemy beneath me, there's nothing to teach me. The people receive me, cause my God complete me. And my God does keep me. And my God they free me. And my God redeem me. And my God relieve me. I'm king of dominion, crown me. I am winning my position. God's giving, God's sending, God's showing. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to the Elevation Podcast. My name is Shawn Riff-Raff, and I have today with me a man by the name of Josh Kelley, and I really want him to talk about him. Yeah. I know we're going to have some great conversation today. It's going to be interesting and different perspectives for you. So, Josh, what's up, man?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm here. It's the evening. I'm ready to be off for the day, but it's cool. It is. Totally
where are you
cool.
located? I looked it up and I completely forgot since then, so I apologize.
Washington, D.C.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a city. That's a
that is the city for 2020.
God,
it is the one city you probably don't want to live in 2020.
Oh man, it's a place that definitely needs Jesus as much as any other, But,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, gosh. So I'm in the Seattle area, about an hour north of Seattle. I'm
sure.
Born in Southern California, left there when I was pretty young. Grew up in this area, so I'm a Northwest boy. Good Christian kid, great family. Really don't have anything to complain about. So I don't have a lot of the suffering and trouble that a lot of people have had. I could be I really could count myself very blessed.
Yes.
Became a pastor, went to Bible college in Southern California, became a pastor, assistant pastor for about 7 years, then the lead pastor of my own church for about 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed that. It's a great community, but frankly, I'm a pretty good teacher and all that, but I'm not a great administrator and all the other things that solo path needs to do. And I made my fair share of mistakes. One of the really dumb things I did early on is so I love the Bible. I love studying, and I'm a student. I think,
Yeah.
and sometimes the reality doesn't dawn on me as clearly. So I was doing a study on communion for whatever reason, and really came to believe that we should be offering wine in addition to grapefruit juice, because I just thought, I was studying all the symbolism and all this, and I just thought that really was what was right. You can agree or disagree with that, but that's kind of what I
Right.
came to. And so I just talked to my elders, and they're like, okay, sure, I guess. And then I just one Sunday everyone showed up, and there was wine, and oh wait, here's one guy in the church who's now former alcoholic, and man,
It became a thing.
oh yeah, I got some attention right away, and I learned a lot of things the hard way. One of the things I learned was I need to listen to my wife, because if I would talk to her about it, she would have said, "Whoa, hang on."
Yeah.
But so I enjoyed being a pastor. I really did. But then I also really enjoyed writing. And so in around 2013, I wrote this book about a concept that meant a lot to me. This whole idea of how we can avoid being, it's called Radically Normal. And the idea is, how can we avoid both being sinful, how to avoid sin, but also how to avoid legalism. And it's like this path we need to walk that's in between the two of them. And maybe we can talk about that later. But I wrote that book. Then we had to close my church a little bit after that, just because of some very stuff that happened, including basically a narcissist try to come in and take over the church, and that was lots of fun. But anyways,
That sounds fun.
after, yeah, gosh, there's I still love Jesus, absolutely, but man, I've seen the pain and difficulty that can come from being in the ministry.
Yeah.
So after that was over, didn't really know what to do. So we sold our house and drove around the country for 8 months.
Oh, that
So we would,
that
yeah,
just sounds. That sounds very. That sounds very
crazy.
explorative, sort of like
Well,
Forrest Gumpish of you.
yeah, it's
Run
one
the
of those things. I've
country.
always loved to travel, and we'd always kind of talked about like, hey, someday we should take a trip around the country, and it's like, okay, well, let's either do it or stop talking about it. So we packed our
Sure.
daughters into our van and did that for again 8 months. Saw 40 states, 2 provinces, and
Wow.
Tijuana,
Wow.
and it was cool. I think unless you've traveled America, it's hard to understand how vast and how uh, different it is.
Yeah,
West Coast and
that's true.
East Coast are two different places.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, anyways, that was really cool. It was a great experience, and I didn't realize it at the time, but really, it was basically my sabbatical. I was burned out after 15 years of being in the ministry and some very hard years. I was burned out. Came back from that, realized I didn't really want to be a pastor anymore. And there's some jobs you can do even if you don't want to do them. You can empty the garbage. There's a bunch of things. It's fine. You're just making money. There's nothing wrong with having a job to provide for your family. I believe
Right.
that strongly.
Absolutely,
But
man.
being a pastor isn't one of those jobs. you know, you know,
You gotta love it.
you gotta love it.
You gotta
Counseling,
love it. You
being
gotta
in
be in it.
politics, really. But I loved writing, so I'm going to keep on writing. And what should I do to provide for my family? Well, I'll bartend. And so,
So that part about your that part about your journey and reading your bio and
mhm,
sort of trying to really understand who you are, behind all of the stuff is super interesting.
yeah,
How did you end up at it from a bartender? Like, how did you end up there?
sure.
Um,
There's a
because
couple.
there's a lot of there's a lot of like conflict within church and ministry about whether or not you know being
Right.
alcohol and mix, and it's sort of, I guess, is Western, Western Christianity that has that conflict.
Right.
How did it work out for you?
So there's, obviously there's tons of pieces. And first of all is, biblically speaking, now this is, again, talking to someone who's studied and spent a lot of time studying the word of God. I came to a place where I'm convinced that alcohol is not a bad thing, but it can be used in very, very, very bad ways. You know,
As can a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. It's sex and alcohol. Both of those are things that are, I believe, were meant to be great gifts, but are so easily used by the devil. And so, if people just avoid alcohol altogether because of how dangerous it is, I get that. I don't disagree. But I came to, I've done the study, and I really believe that there's a way to use it properly. And among other things, also as a Christian, in 1 Corinthians 11 or 12, I can't remember off the top of my head, 12, I think it says something, it's earlier than that, but whatever you do to the glory of God. Whether you eat or drink, do it to the glory of God, right?
Right.
And I believe that, among other things, the church should be teaching people how to eat and drink to the glory of God, because if Christian, as alcohol becomes more acceptable among Christians, good or bad, that is the reality. It used to be almost any evangelical, any Pentecostal, alcohol, it's a sin, no questions, that's it. That's changing. With that changing, who's going to be the one who's teaching the next generation how to drink in a God honoring manner? You don't get drunk. You certainly don't become an alcoholic. You're not rude when you drink. You don't drink around someone who's an alcoholic, who struggles with alcohol. There's all these things of how to do something in a God honoring manner. And if the church isn't teaching that, then who is? So I'd already come to all this years prior.
Okay.
So when basically the service industry is a place that you can potentially make really decent money without any specific schooling. You have to have some very specific skill sets. So my ADHD, the fact I'm an extrovert, the fact I'm good with people, a lot of these things allowed me to, frankly, make more money as a bartender than I did as a pastor.
Sure.
And I did get into it very quickly, and it gave me a certain amount of flexibility in my schedule. So I could write, working on a novel, I'd write in the morning, then I'd bartend in the evenings and afternoons. It's not a sustainable job, it's a young man's job. I'm what, 46, 47, and it's like, okay, let's get the bar back to put that keg on. I'm too old for that. I'm gonna hurt myself. And it wasn't my calling either. It's a way that I could earn money for my family, and I believe that's a hugely God honoring thing to do.
Sure.
But now, because of COVID, I lost my job, and that God really used that to allow me to kind of pivot out of the service industry into writing full time. Now working as a ghostwriter and editor and some other stuff, which is really, really cool. But that time of being a bartender, I don't regret. It really, when you're in the ministry, it's very easy to forget that not everyone in your church thinks about church all the time. And I remember that, and like the pastor at my church, and I love him. He is a great guy, but there's every once in a while I kind of see these hints that he forgets that I'm not always thinking about church, or not me personally, but people in general.
Sure.
And gosh, I know I've gone every which way. I don't know. Have I answered any of your questions?
No, you're perfectly good. You're perfectly fine. So when doing things that, and being a bartender, and also having the conviction of being a Christian,
right?
Is it to be a successful bartender? You have to. Yeah, I don't know how it works on the West Coast. Yeah. But over here, you have to get tips and you have to serve alcohol.
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes to be a good bartender.
Actually,
Serving alcohol means you have to keep selling it.
Right.
So when you say things like, teaching how to honorably do alcohol, meaning don't get drunk and don't be around people who suffer like that. When you're when you're a bartender, isn't that inherently what you have to do to be successful as a bartender?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so first of all, there's how I'm going to interact with Christians versus how I'm going to interact with non-Christians, right?
Okay.
A non-Christian, I don't expect them to live by biblical standards. I'm not worried about getting a non-Christian to not sleep around. I'm about getting them to know Jesus.
Right.
So with Christians, I'm going to teach and I'm going to train, like even with my daughters. I'm talking about this stuff,
Right.
hey, they're not old enough, but they're getting old enough where it's like I might let them have a little sip, so I don't want booze to have like this huge mystique where they can't wait to try because it's so forbidden. But I'm teaching them. But at the bar, it's a different thing. I am now, yeah, I work for tips. 2/3 of my income was tips, and now the laws here in Washington is I can't serve anyone who appears intoxicated. So
Right.
that kind of provided a certain level of stop.
Okay.
But there's also times there'd have some people I'd be serving. It's like, man, this is the fifth time this week, and you're always kind of taking right to the limit. And every once in a while, I'd have situations that were upsetting to me like that. The bar I worked at was not a dive bar. It
Okay.
was mainly naval officers was a large part of our clientele,
Okay.
and those guys and girls can drink, but they didn't take it too far because they had a lot to lose. But it's kind of like, imagine if you're an internet service provider, like your job is working for Comcast or whatever the company is out there in DC.
Hmm.
You're going to be providing internet, and let's face it, a lot of the guys you're providing internet for, they're going to use it for porn.
Sure.
That's a reality.
Yeah.
Anything you do there's sinfulness inherent in it. In fact, and this is one of the crazy things when you think about it, as a pastor, I'm also setting up people for sin in a certain extent because of self-righteousness and spiritual pride. To the extent when I start to encourage people to study the Bible and to love Jesus and to not do this and not do that, but to do this instead, those are all really good things. But because the human heart, mine included, is evil, we immediately take these good things and turn it into something bad to where, and personally, I face more temptation to sin when I walk into a Bible study than when I walk into a bar. I know that sounds crazy, but what I mean by that is, for me, my intellect, my brain, and my knowledge has always been what I've prided myself on to very bad degrees.
Okay.
And so when I go into Bible study, I have to. That's where I'm really tempted to be arrogant, to be self-righteous. In
Hmm.
a bar, I'm going to behave myself,
Right.
because I'm not going to do that stuff. But does that make any sense? I know it sounds crazy to say,
No,
but
no, no. You're good. You're good. I'm definitely following you. Um. Yeah. I just wanted to ask that question and throw that
yeah,
idea around just for anyone who may have been thinking that, like thinking about that question. Tell me
oh, it's a
about
great.
your. I just want to throw that out there. I just
Yeah,
wanted for anyone that may have been thinking about that question, as we
yeah,
go along. Tell me about your first book, and your first book is Radically Normal, right?
yeah.
That's your first
So
book.
radically normal. So here's the idea of radically normal. I've already hinted to the main concept quite a bit.
Sure.
Let me first say kind of what drove it. And that is, as a pastor, I saw so many Christians, and also going to Bible college and all of this, I saw so many Christians who had this feeling like if they weren't in mission, if they weren't missionaries to China, if they weren't pastors, they couldn't be like a 100% all the way sold out child of God or Christian. Like they could be okay Christians, but to really be a great Christian, you had to do all these radical things. And there's at the time I wrote this, this is 2012, 2013. So there's some books like Radical and Crazy Love that came out that had a lot of great material in it. But I think they inadvertently really drove this idea that radical Christianity is the best, is the highest Christianity. That being in, again, full-time ministry, that doing all these things, praying instead of going to a movie, that's inherently more spiritual or better. So I saw this from a lot of Christians, and when you have that sort of mindset, then pastors have this idea that if I like set a really high bar, people
Hmm.
are going to, well, at least maybe they'll get this high. They may not, get all the way there, but at least they'll get a little bit higher. In
Okay.
reality, a lot of people, if they see a bar sitting here, they'll go, oh, forget about it. I'm not even going to try. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So what I try to do is like say, hey, God intended, God certainly calls all of us to different things. So for a while, I
Sure.
was called to be a bartender. I believe that. For a
Hmm.
longer time, I was called to be a pastor, and I enjoyed that. Each of us have our own callings, and we need to follow that calling. And any one of those callings can be fully spiritual and good and God honoring and pleasing, regardless of whether or not it involves preaching the gospel day in and day out. So that's
Right.
kind of the heart behind it. Is how can you? That's what I meant by radically normal. How you can live a life that is genuinely wholehearted and pleasing to God,
Hmm.
but yet it can look very normal, you know.
Yeah.
But so there's kind of like the heart of it, but the concept, kind of this driving metaphor, you'd say, of the book is, so when I, you know, again, I grew up in church, I was a good kid. In youth group, they'd always talk about it as if like you're walking along this cliff, you're on this path and you're walking on this cliff, and on this side is all the destructive sins, you know, sleeping with your girlfriend, smoking, listening to, you know, Depeche Mode or whatever it is, you know, because I'm from that old. But you know, those are bad things, and you stay as far away from that cliff as possible. And I did. I didn't do any. I mean, man, it's squeaky clean.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. But what no one told me, because I don't think they realized, was that there was another cliff on the other side of that path of self-righteousness, of spiritual pride, and that's the cliff I jumped off. I cannonballed off that one. I
Mm.
literally, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I would literally kind of rank people in my youth group. You know, oh, they listen to secular music, so they're not as good of a Christian as I am.
Mhm.
They don't speak
Mm.
in tongues because I grew up Pentecostal, so therefore
Right.
they're not really good Christians. Uh, he slept with his girlfriend. I'm not even sure he's saved. You know, that's about the way it worked. And so what I really try to do, I look at so many things in a Christian life and talk about basically both the cliffs of legalism on one side and destructive sins on the other side.
Mhm.
And that's the message I keep on coming back to. And let's talk about evangelism from that perspective of what are the two cliffs. Let's talk about how we spend our money. Let's talk about spiritual
Mm.
practices. Let's talk about joy. I wanted to have a drinking chapter on there on drinking, about both either destructiveness or self-righteousness, but my publisher Harvest House said, sorry, we have whole groups of our people we distribute to who won't touch it if there's anything in there. So it's like, okay, you know, I can
That's
work.
very interesting. I find that, you know, yeah, I find that it's very hard to, you know, deal in the regular world like that, you know, and not have to deal with the legalism of the actual business of you know, Christian products. Um,
Oh God, yeah.
when someone is talking to you about the, you know, because it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is like the, you know, normal people, how to display Christ or how to be
Mhm.
Christian, from a normal point of view,
Right.
not from, you know, the limelight point of view.
Well, yeah.
You know, not the center of attention sort of, you know, pastor or preacher or evangelist by title or title period, and, you know, and
Right. Yeah.
just your everyday life. Um, what does everyday life ministry look like? Like, what is everyday life evangelism to you? Like, what does it mean to just, you know, do ministry from just being a normal person, not, you know, not being called to preach or teach or prophesy, or not being called
Sure.
to any of that, just to be normal. What is normal
Yeah.
ministry from your point of view?
Well, I first back it up, and we won't even talk about normal ministry. Let's back it up, because in terms of, like, we always talk about the Great Commission, right? You know, go into all
Sure.
the nations, make disciples. That's really the second Great Commission, not the first.
Mm.
And this is why I think we miss a lot of times. The first Great Commission comes from Genesis, chapter 2, or is it chapter 3, where God says to Adam, you know, subdue the earth, rule it. You know, basically that whole idea there is God called Adam to work hard. You know, this is he's going to be caring for this garden. He's naming these animals, but this whole imagery that's happening there is that, excuse me, God is the creator. He set this creation in place, and then he handed it over to us, and we're supposed to be God's representatives. It's like kind of
Sure.
like God's ambassadors to the earth. And at this point, there's no other people there. It's Adam and Eve, but we're his representatives to the earth. So it's our job to take care of the plants and the animals and everything, and to be good stewards of it. That right there is our first Great Commission. We are working hard, we're providing for our family, we're just living life, and doing, you know, living righteously in all those things, we're fulfilling the first Great Commission. And I want to really elevate hard work and the
Hmm.
value of, and whether that hard work can mean a whole bunch of different things. It may mean
Sure.
volunteering, it may be raising a family,
Hmm.
insane. If you're disabled, then maybe hard work means just for you to like keep your house clean is hard work. Well, that's God honoring, whatever it is. I can't say for any given person what that's going to look like. So I start there, that just doing the best with what God's given us to live quiet lives, as it talks about. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's Paul that says basically we try to live at peace with everyone, just live a quiet life and live with peace. If we're doing that off the bat, let's make that honorable among Christians. And now from there, in First Peter, I think it's. I'm sorry, I don't have the passage in my mind anymore, right off the top of my head, but Peter talks about basically living quiet lives that honor God, that so that when the unbelievers ask us for a reason for the hope in us, that we can answer with respect and gentleness. For most of us, that's our situation. God certainly calls certain people to be evangelists, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that, because that's not me. And so I believe in really valuing and supporting the people who have different callings than me.
Sure.
But for most of us, it's going to be like daily life. You have to look for these opportunities where God gives you to speak. So I had, I think, working there at the bar, everyone has it. There's this image of like bartenders being counselors. It's like, that really doesn't happen very often, at least not the bar I was at, Every once in a while there'd be a situation. And I just was always, every time when I drove into work, it's like, okay, God, I pray that you help me glorify and honor you above all else. Help me to be a blessing to the owner. Help me be a blessing to my coworkers, and help me be a blessing to the people who come in. And that was my prayer every time. And that helped me keep a good attitude when days when I really didn't want to be there, or I was annoyed with coworkers or whatnot. But a lot of times it just was just working hard, being kind. And I can't tell you how many times people said, so are you the owner? No, I'm just a bartender. But because I was passionate about what I did, I took ownership. And because I viewed it as I'm working as unto God, it showed. So that was kind of that base level thing. But then every once in a while, these opportunities would open up. And I just, I'd have situations where I just have to be praying silently, like, okay, God, what am I supposed to say here? Like I had one guy who came in, he asked for a glass of water, and he's just sitting there drinking his water. And I'm getting close to saying, hey, man, you got to buy something or leave. Just because in general, we don't encourage people just to sit there. But then he started talking about what was going on in his life, and it had something to do with his wife. I can't remember the specifics now, but it's like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm here today. This is, and this is why he's here. And so I prayed, God, help me give him the right wisdom. And I think I was able to give him some wise words. Would he use them? I don't know.
Sure.
But does that make sense? Like, you're always ready.
Yeah. It's not, whether he uses them or not is on him.
Yeah.
Whether he's armed for them, with them or not, is on you. So that was God. That if God had you speak something to someone, your job is to speak it to them. Your job is not necessarily to make sure that they follow through with it. Sometimes God gives you, your job is to speak it, and that's your job. Move on. I think some people misunderstand their position in ministry sometimes when they try to follow through with God, what God just says, speak.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If God says speak, and then, you want to follow through and make sure somebody is doing it, and God didn't say do that part. God said speak. And so, yeah, I totally get you. I wanted to ask you a question about what is your next book? What is Double Vodka?
Okay, so that's a novel. I'm still not entirely sure of the title. I'm still working on that.
Okay, so it's just because I read it on your website and I didn't,
it doesn't. The title worked when it's kind of is a book that started as one thing. It kind of changed, and that often happens, especially when you're telling stories. It changes a lot, and I'm planning to write a total of 3 books, if Lord willing. And Double Vodka makes sense for the entire thing. Because double vodka becomes, I end up using it as kind of my symbol for basically wanting to ignore the past. But it didn't. I'm kind of my working title now. I'm thinking about changing it to the sins of the fathers, because that describes it a little better. It's kind of a little Christianese though, and that's why I'm reluctant. But it's a story, yeah. Oh man. I initially set out to write that story as a quote unquote non-Christian novel, meaning
Sure.
it's coming from who I am as a Christian, but I wanted to tell a story, a redemptive story to people outside of the church, because the church has plenty of redemptive storytellers, but
Sure.
not so much so in the world, right?
Hmm.
Um, I honestly don't know whether or not I'll be able to do that, because it's the story is basically about of this one book. Though there's a much larger picture, but this one book, the story is basically about a young kid, high school graduate. He's just going to start going to Bible college. He's the hot shot at youth group, and his goal is to become the big pastor of the biggest church in his denomination by the youngest age possible. But he also likes to steal porn from the local 7-Eleven. It's set a while ago when there was no
Yeah.
internet,
Yeah.
and
When
you
there were
know,
magazines.
so you have this kind of dual life that he's got going on, and then he meets this gal who's comes from a very legalistic background, and
Sure.
you don't find it out right away, but she's sexually abused, and she's got her own issues going on. And what I've watched so many really good-hearted people get together, and things still kind of blow up
Hmm.
because they don't understand their own brokenness.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I was playing with. I mean, the story is more straightforward than that, but in terms of, I had so much I wanted to say in terms of forgiveness, the destructiveness of sin. You can say things like, don't have sex until you're married or whatnot, or you can say those things. But what if you can instead can tell a story that shows sexuality means a lot, and that the reason why we say wait for marriage is not because we don't like sex, but because we think sex is pretty awesome, but it's very powerful and
Hmm.
it's very meaningful. And so what if I can tell stories that show the meaningful, and then when you misuse it, it's still
Hmm.
meaningful, but in a bad way. And okay, so now again, and I'm not so much talking about what the plot is about, which when you talk about your book, you're supposed to talk about what the story is, because
Hmm.
it's first and foremost a great story. There's all these ideas in me, it kind of bubbles forth, but I always want to keep this story going of this kind of the what happens when this golden tongue kid meets up with this legalistic girl she's a real sweetheart. She's very loving, but she also has a real legalistic backdrop to her. It's a fun book to write. It really was. I loved the story. I fell in love with the characters. Now I'm thinking maybe trying to publish it with a Christian publisher, because I know no secular publishers want to publish a book about a kid on a Bible college campus. Uh, it's such a screwy world. It's kind of like any given place has its own weirdness to it, right? And
Yes.
so I want to tell this story, kind of showing how screwy we as Christians can be, but yet in a fun way, not mocking.
Hmm.
Because I love the evangelical community. Of course, the term evangelical itself can be very problematic, because it means a lot of different things to different people.
Yes.
But when I say evangelical in this point, I just mean people who genuinely love Jesus and are trying to obey the Bible.
Right.
And within that, there's a
There's
lot of
several
variations.
different ways to go about it.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't think evangelical is a political label at all. But anyways, I show
Man, except it is when you're talking. It's weird.
yeah, it's certainly become that, which is sad. But anyways, again, I'm kind of rambling, but basically wanting to tell a story, kind of poking fun at myself a little bit, at the Christian community, but in a way that it sees our value as well. Like one thing that is interesting is, like, so for instance, I know so often there's a perception of white evangelicals as being inherently racist. And so one of the things I put in this story is basically one of the is it isn't some friends from college, but is inspired by a friend from college. There's this guy, Will. I probably shouldn't. I haven't gotten his permission to talk about him, so I won't say his full name. But Will, brilliant guy. And just the nature of being at a four-square college, there weren't that many black folks. It's just so people could think there's maybe some sort of issues, but it just, the denomination unfortunately is fairly white. But
Sure.
Will, he was this brilliant guy. We were in the Greek program together, and just a brilliant guy. And so he started dating this white gal, and I think the perception is that would be rejected at the Bible college campus. And so I put a similar couple in my book, but no one cares about that, because no one cared about that at my college.
Right.
But there's a perception that everyone would have really hated it, been mad, but no one really cared. Our only thought was, well, she's a little young, because they had I don't know, fairly like 5-6 years age difference, which at 20 and 26, that's a big deal. But
Right.
that was really, and I actually messaged him on Facebook, like, Will, I'm trying to remember, I didn't see anything, but I can't assume that there wasn't an issue just because I didn't see it. He's like, no, there was no issues. You're right. And okay. So I'm going every which way.
That's
Hopefully I'm
very
making
interesting. Very
some.
interesting. Let me ask you. I'm gonna ask you a standard question that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
Call this a gotcha question, but it's not really. But it's not really. But everybody wishes that I would tell them ahead of time when I ask them this question. But that wouldn't be as fun if I did that. What is if you had a stage of we got a stage and we got 100 million people listening to us,
Mm-hmm.
and I give you opportunity to say one life lesson that you can give all of these people, that would be the most important lesson that you could give them. What is that lesson?
I suppose I have a little bit of unfair advantage on that question, simply because it's something that I kind of say, and I don't put in that way, but in my book, if there is one thing I could really get people to understand, is that sin is that which destroys us, and righteousness brings joy. Sin isn't a bunch of things God randomly created a list and said, don't do them. I just don't want you to have fun. But rather, it's like, right, God looks at us, this is the stuff that will destroy us. Right. So don't do it. And righteousness, right, done right, brings joy. The biblical joy is kind of the center point it's one of these key things in the Bible. The Bible talks more about joy than it talks about grace, or peace or love. It's like, it just talks about joy all the time. So I want people to understand that obedience to God brings joy. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, that sin is always a way that brings misery eventually. And if we understood that, if I understood that, how different would I live my life? Like when my wife really makes me angry, and what I really want to do is make that nasty cutting comment. If I could just in that moment remember that righteousness is, treating her with understanding and to forgive and to just hang on and, all these other things, that would bring more joy in the long term. I wish I remembered that. There's plenty of times I don't. So that to me is one of the most key messages that, and I say that because the enemy is so thoroughly corrupted that, he still has us believing that sin is fun.
Definitely. Like I say this often, well, maybe not that often, maybe not as often I should, but sin is death packaged in happiness.
Yeah. Good way to say it.
And what it makes you feel like is that if you rid yourself of the sin, you'll also rid yourself of happiness, which is just an illusion. It's like a Christmas gift. You know what I'm saying? The wrapping paper is actually nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's worthless. It's no value to it. That is a really good lesson. Because, righteousness is actually, is actually joy. You just have to get away from the idea that you're happy you're sinning. Because you're not, you have to get away from the idea that something like revenge will make you happy, or something like, like, because it doesn't, it doesn't. It just, it's just a package. That's really good. All right, let me ask you another gotcha question, because you're good at them. If there was one, if God said, listen, I'm gonna give you the grace to change one thing about the whole world, right? If God said, I'm gonna give you the grace, you can change one thing about the world or humanity or whatever it is you want to change one thing about. He did the Morgan Freeman and Jim Carrey thing on you and said, I'll make you God for one day of grace.
That's a tough one. You know what? You did get me on that one. I can't think of any answer because the philosopher in me is always saying, well, if I did this, then I'm sure that have that negative effect, and all those unintended
That's
consequences.
the chess player.
And it's there's part of it. It's like we just want everyone
Wish
to
for
do
more
what is
wishes.
yeah. We want everyone to just do what's right. Okay, let's because the basic problem in this system is sin. Whether we're talking about violence or racism or greed or pollution. You know, I know the church is not just finally, but starting to pay more attention to the environment because we've always associated environmentalism with like weirdo new age stuff. It's like, no, that's part
Right.
of taking care of God's environment, or more than that, actually, not just taking care of God's environment. How much of uh, the problems in the environment are driven by our sorry, I don't mean poking at you. Didn't realize that's where my camera is.
I know.
How much consumerism,
Right.
so let's go for something that's going to be simpler. You know what? Let's it's not necessarily going to be the most impactful, but I think it might change our ways, and that is no, I was going to say get rid of plastic, but I'm trying to think of something that jolt us out of our way of this consumerism of always having to buy, always having to buy. And if I could think of some way that would force us to make things last longer, because consumerism is driven by not by need but by want.
Sure.
And I'm a consumer too. I can't say otherwise. Gosh, Shawn, you really got me. I think I was so smart with that first one, but now, yeah, let's just get rid of smartphones. There,
I mean, I'm with you on that one.
oh man, I hit my smartphone and I love it. As again, ADHD.
I'm with you on that one. Especially for the children. Get rid of them all. They're so addicted. It's terrible.
Yeah,
Man, listen. Where can I wanna be able to make sure that people who want to get in contact with you and want to purchase a book or just hear more from you can access you. Where can people access you at?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is joshkelley.inc. So JOSHKELLEY. You got an extra E in there, and .inc, INK, like the stuff you write with. So I have that website mainly set up for my ghostwriting, developmental editing. So one of the things I've really realized is that I'm great at helping other people write. So think of it this way: I've spent 15 years honing my ability to write. There's other people out there who've spent that much time or more, serving the poor, running a business, or teaching kids, whatever it is. But they've really honed their skill in a different area. And so my idea as a ghostwriter is I can work with another person and bring my writing skills, and they bring their experience. I just finished ghostwriting a book for a gal who's this 83-year-old woman who started out as a missionary in Philippines, and then her family died in a plane wreck, and her husband had to fly back to the U.S. to run the family business. They just want to sell it and go back to being missionaries. But someone told them, you can support the kingdom of God so much better if you run this business really well, because it's a big business, and use that money to support missions. And they went on to literally start thousands of churches. So being able to help people tell stories like that is what I like to do as a ghostwriter. Also do editing, things like that. So they can find out more about my ghostwriting and editing stuff there. There's a little bit about my book, some more about my novel, have a little bit of information there. And you can contact me there. I'm always happy to respond to emails. I'm usually pretty good at that. And I know Amazon's the easiest way to get my book, although I have a couple cases in my garage that I'm happy to sell as well.
That's what everybody who's written a book always wants you to order from them. Me being an artist, me being starting in Christian hip hop, I was the same way back in the day about CDs, like don't go to the store. That cost me 85% done. Versus just buy it from me, call me,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's super cool. I definitely got your website address there. Anything? Do you have any, like, if you had to close out this and say something in closing, what would you say?
You know, I don't know if this is the most profound thing I have to say, but it's just what's on my heart right now because of recent conversation. And so this is just me. But when the whole COVID thing hit, it was huge for me in that all of a sudden I didn't have a job. And that was, I had a week there where I was in rough shape. I mean, I was really doing bad because so much of my life has been about trying to be successful. I've always wanted to work hard. I've wanted to accomplish things, and I've never felt like I've accomplished as much as I wanted to. And that's driven me in ways that it gets stuff done, but frankly, a lot of times it's been very unhealthy. It's been very unhealthy for my marriage. And so I've been in this process of really trying to be okay with just being a child of God, that He loves me, and that's what my identity is. I mean, I've taught that for years, but to actually understand it. So this is kind of where I'm at, is God, I'm wanting to work hard. I'm wanting to honor and glorify you through writing, through podcasts, however I can. But at the end of the day, that's not who I am. And I hope that that maybe that's useful to someone, because it's so easy to make your identity what you do. And I want to work.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it just
Yeah.
that's one of the things where I'm currently at.
Yeah, no, I've absolutely 100% been there. To wrap your who you are into what you do, instead of letting. I talk to people a lot about how God knew you before the foundations of the earth, and if He knew you before the foundations of the earth, you can rest assured that He knows you in eternity. He knows you better than you know you. Therefore, you can't wrap yourself in something that you don't even know that well. So really, in order to know who you are, you got to get into Him to understand you, because He knows you better than you know you, because He knew you before you knew you were aware of you. So I definitely struggled with that for a long time in my life. I wrapped myself up in what I did and not who I was, even under the context of being sold out, of being sold out for Christ. And selling the idea that I'm sold out isn't sold. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Telling myself the idea that I'm sold out is less sold out than actually being sold out. It's like, buying a fake Versace. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't. There's a process to this. And
it just becomes another thing to be proud about, in a negative sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, look at all I'm doing for God. Look how much I've given up, or whatever. It's like, no, He wants us for who we are.
Yeah. That's who He created. That's who He created. Who we are is who He created. That's who He didn't. He's the one. He's the creator, not you. Man, this is awesome, man. Listen, I appreciate you for coming on.
Absolutely.
This has been a great conversation. A great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to, actually, I'm going to order your book as soon as we get off of here, and I look forward to, look forward to reading it. Looking forward to, staying in touch and talking to you here again.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, man. I would love that. So good talking to you.
Good talking to you, sir. All right. Thank you so much. Faith is a lifestyle. It is the mountain on which you stand that makes you believe that a dream is actually attainable. It is the concrete evidence that makes the logically impossible seem completely tangible. It seemed hopeless, but faith. I can't prove it, but faith. I can't explain it, but my faith has given me peace. I'm a Christian with $100 million vision. Can nobody box me and say that's a contradiction? Goal driven, God just blessed me with the ambition. Look up, winner is the definition. When I was 20 years old, I started one of the first multi-artist gospel rap labels in the country. Who listens to that, they said. That has no future is what they told me. That's a dead end, they kept repeating. That's a career killer, they warned me. What they didn't understand is that a pioneer can see past what you think is possible and has the endurance to push it through. And my new media television platform is that pioneer's mind at work once again. I give the unheard a voice. I give the marginalized a stage. And I give the unfortunate a good hand. This is Christian media like you've never seen it before. Because this is Shawn Riff-Raff Studios.
I'm a Christian with $100 million vision. Can nobody box me and say that's a contradiction? Goal driven, God just blessed me with the ambition. Look up when the rest, he rests the definition. Been through hell, but the fire couldn't crisp them. Shut down the mouths of anybody, you dismissed them. 20 years gospel rap broke all the traditions. Cause from a teenager I was on the same mission. So when he running God business, he got clothing, plus he got the boss with him. He got a squad with him, real no frauds with him. He run into the light cause he is an optimist. When everybody in the music biz narcissists, I will not rap a thing but my consciousness. Forever always a kingdom rap activist. It took a break for a minute, let's get back to this. Yeah. Been a soul winner, you cannot box me. Control center, you cannot box me. Flow with it, you cannot box me while I glow with it. You cannot box me cause I'm stepping out.